30th of June, 13th Sunday in Ordinary Time. Sermon on Mark chapter 5, verses 21 to 43. The healing of Jairus' daughter and of the woman with the hemorrhage are well-known Bible stories told in each of the three synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark and Luke. They're so well known, in fact, that we often skim-read them and miss important details. In this sermon, I want to focus mainly on the woman whom Jesus healed of a hemorrhage. She's often viewed as a side issue, the one who held up Jesus when he was on the way to heal the little daughter of an important man. But this is the account of an unclean woman who dared to venture out in a crowd and who had the temerity to touch the robe of the Messiah. Her story teaches us a great deal about Jesus, about the Jewish society of the time, and it reveals important lessons for us about God's kingdom. But the account starts with Jairus, a synagogue leader, who came to Jesus just as he had landed on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. If we glance back at the previous chapters in Mark's Gospel, we find a catalogue of unremitting challenges that presented themselves to Jesus. He'd calmed a storm that terrified his disciples, crossed the lake where he'd healed a demon-possessed man, then crossed back over the lake to find himself confronted by a crowd. And there was Jairus pleading for his sick daughter, only 12 years old and at the point of death. One wonders when Jesus had the chance to snatch some sleep or to eat a meal. But there was no impatience in his manner, no excuses. He simply went with Jairus, and a big crowd followed. But in the crowd there was a woman who should not have been there. She had a permanent hemorrhage that had troubled her for 12 years, the whole lifetime of Jairus' little girl. Under the law of Israel, a woman was unclean who was bleeding, either through her regular menstrual cycle or by some menstrual irregularity that caused her to continue to bleed. Leviticus 15 tells us that anything she lies on and anything she sits on will be unclean. Whoever touches her bed must wash his clothes and bathe with water and will be unclean until evening. Whoever touches anything that she sits on must wash his clothes and bathe with water and will be unclean till evening. If a man lies with her, he will be unclean for 7 days. Any bed he lies on will be unclean. To hemorrhage for 12 years would be debilitating to a woman's health. She would be pale, weak and tired with anemia, probably aching continually. And it's no surprise that this poor woman had spent all she had on trying to obtain a cure. However, it takes little imagination to realise that beyond the immediate health issues, to live with this complaint would make ordinary existence almost impossible. For anything she touched to be rendered unclean, and anyone who came into contact with such unclean items to be similarly rendered unclean, would challenge the practicalities of daily life. The homes of the poor were small, probably only 1 or 2 rooms. It would be almost impossible for such a woman to avoid touching items that others would touch. And the requirements to wash clothes and to bathe, without the modern facilities of showers and washing machines, would create even more of a burden. I can't imagine it. Women were probably divorced over such problems. Furthermore, an unclean woman would have been excluded from the synagogue, from worship. It had probably been Jairus who had overseen her exclusion. Nor would she have been welcome at the temple. She was effectively cut off from God and from normal human contact. But here she was in the midst of a crowd of people, and she was approaching the Messiah, Jesus Christ, who was on his way to reach Jairus' daughter before death claimed her. The woman just touched Jesus' robe, convinced that if she only laid her hand on his clothes, she would be healed. Where she'd found such faith after 12 years of suffering and disappointment, I can't imagine. We don't know. It may have been that she'd heard of other healings, or it may have been the prompting of the Holy Spirit. But touch him she did, and was immediately healed. Jesus felt power going out from him, and he stopped and turned, seeking the one who had touched him. Couldn't he have taken no notice? He was, after all, on his way to save a child's life, and he was accompanied by the leader of the synagogue. Jairus most likely was shocked and alarmed at the delay. Couldn't it wait? But no, Jesus, the Lord of time and space, could stop and spend the time to ensure that the woman was not only healed of her infirmity, but properly restored, sent back into society, back to her life as it should be. The woman came forward trembling with fear, knowing she had contravened the law and outraged public decency, but knowing also that she was healed. There was no reproof in Jesus' words. He called her daughter, restoring her to her place in society, just as later in her ministry he would restore Zacchaeus the tax collector, calling him a son of Abraham. And Jesus commended her faith and assured her that she was truly healed. But it was too late for Jairus. The delay had cost his daughter her life. The news had just been brought to him. Your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher any more? Why bother Jesus now the girl was dead? Because death could not prevail against his power, Jesus went on to Jairus' house and raised the little child back to life, just like waking her from sleep. In his short ministry, Jesus often met with and confronted the factors that cause suffering in this world, pain, sickness and death, together with poverty, cruelty and despair. He said the kingdom of heaven had drawn near, but it existed still in the midst of all that is wrong in our existence on this planet. The theologian Jürgen Moltmann makes a startling statement about the accounts of Jesus' healing. He says they're not unnatural events in a natural world. They are the only natural events in a world that is unnatural and demonic. We often look around our world and see the glorious things of creation, and we rightly thank God for his gifts to us. We can experience joy in human relationships, the thrill of achieving skills and the satisfaction of work done well. And we have our faith, our Christian community, our worship of the Lord. Beyond all that, however, it is easy to see that this world is not the world God intended. It is so full of suffering. Our beautiful planet has been ruined before our eyes. People are starving. Their crops are failing through drought, flood or wildfires. We hear of devastating wars and terrible human cruelty perpetrated against the most vulnerable. Not only humans are suffering, animals are being deprived of their natural habitats, species are disappearing, and environments polluted. Moltmann is right. This is not a natural world at all. And demonic? It's a strong word, but it surely denotes the way in which even well-intentioned politicians so often make the wrong choices. They make mistakes, or allow power to go to their heads so that they become self-seeking and unprincipled, as if some malign power is controlling them. Think of the senseless wars that have been waged during the last few years, just as the world was recovering from a devastating pandemic that had largely been caused by human mismanagement. Jesus came into this world to redeem fallen humans and ultimately to restore the whole of creation. During his earthly ministry, he gave us glimpses of his power and authority, coupled with wonderful compassion. When his kingdom comes in its fullness, as come it will, Jesus will heal all sickness, just as he healed the poor woman with the hemorrhage. And he'll raise the dead as easily as he awoke Jairus' daughter. Jesus demonstrated his power among fallen humans, healing and restoring. He has the power to restore the whole of creation from the unnatural state in which it now is, to the perfect, natural, wonderful condition that God always intended it to be. And we ourselves will be made whole.